But a big reason why Rome was so wealthy is because they were ruling over Egypt, and
Yeah.
they had essentially colonized Egypt, and they were
Yeah.
extracting its resources for the Roman Empire's benefit. So, um, you know, there's so many examples of like colonialism before what we consider to be the colonial era in the modern day, right? Like a lot
Yeah.
of people mistakenly think like the first piece of colonialism was like during the age of sail with like these modern European states. But like one of my videos, I talk about the Cholas in South India, like engaged in pseudo-colonial enterprises in like Indonesia and Malaysia. So it's not like they went there because they're like, hey, we just want to like be friends with you. Like they came there so
Yeah.
that they could like manipulate their politics to benefit them economically.
Yeah.
So
No, that is mostly what history is. People just going out to like another land and conquering it. That's always been it.
right, right. And it's fascinating how like so much of that is like symbolic, and
Yeah.
that there's a strange balance because even in the modern day, I don't know if you're really into like geopolitics, but there's this there's this idea that like states states grow and expand just due to the natural like incentive of like power begets more power, right? Because
Okay.
and generally speaking, like someone who's in a position of power either wants to maintain his position or wants to expand it, right? So like
Yeah.
there's like a natural kind of propagation of power and its structures. But as a general rule, uh, states tend to perform better when they are able to be administered more efficiently, and they're like more efficient bureaucratically in general, right? Like, and part of that
Yeah.
is like it's a lot harder to administer a massive state with that's very diverse than it is like a much smaller homogenous like state where you
Yeah.
like from like a bureaucratic perspective, you know how to govern those people, you know how to tax them, you know how to manage the markets better, like they're
Yeah.
so as a general rule smaller states tend to be more prosperous on like from a per capita perspective, right?
Yeah. But that
So there's
makes
kind of
sense
like,
because
oh, go ahead.
culturally, like you would be a little more. You would be more like you would have more knowledge on the culture just in general that you're like
Exactly.
governing
Yeah.
because you're from there. Like
Exactly. So,
yeah.
and I think like just taking a step back, of course, larger states can govern small regions really well too, because it's not like they're governing it from the center and like
Yeah.
completely, right? Like they have local governors and then their bureaucrats under them. They might even keep all the different like lords and bureaucrats in general there, but
Yeah.
just have like an additional layer on top of that. But every single time you add more layers, you add bureaucratic inefficiency,
No,
right?
that's a good point because even like for example the Persians or even Alexander the Great conquered so much land. They would have like something called a satrap, right? Which is basically what you're describing, right? And
Right,
that
right,
person would usually be from that area, but he would just be um he'd be loyal to obviously the emperor at the time, right? Whether it was Cyrus the Great or it was Alexander the Great, right? And that
right.
person would obviously like maintain that region and government under like
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
emperor.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see it's like fascinating because like anytime it's not like these empires are not trying to govern locally too. Like they are
Yeah,
doing whether they're maintaining the entire power structure or whether they're implementing some new structure, they still have like layers upon layers, like at this regional level, then at this local level, what have you. So it's not that those mechanisms aren't there. It's just that it's more inefficient because every layer of bureaucracy you add, there's going to be some inefficiencies that get imposed, right?
yeah,
So my point is that like from that perspective, smaller states tend to be better for the people in it, right? But there's a balance because if you're too small, you are at risk for being swallowed up eventually by a larger state. So then it kind of
Yeah.
like, then you almost need larger states just to protect the stability of your state. So it's like
Yeah.
that economic efficiency aspect gets pushed aside by the military efficiency aspect, right? It's like,
Yeah.
anyways, I guess my point is just that like I find that tightrope which powers need to walk, like whether historically or even in the modern day, this idea of like how big do you need to be really to maintain wealth, stability, and like, because a lot of times I'll read about these empires and I'll just think to myself, but what about the average person? You know what I mean? Because like it's
Yeah.
so common when you read about history, you read about this king or this lord or this general or this scholar. I mean, the scholar is like probably from some rich family and it has like court funds to use and stuff like that. Like these aren't normal people, right? Like so when they're writing, it would be like asking like Jeff Bezos what he thinks about Seattle. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, Seattle's great. But like then ask like some, maybe ask like a working class person what he thinks about it. Their opinion will be very different. But those people, their opinions are very rarely in the historical record. So you have to be
I
really
think there is
careful
a
in
channel
reading
on
history.
history, like they do talk about like the average person and like what they went through in that empire, right? Like the average Roman, or the average Egyptian, average Carthaginian. Like I've seen like some episode, I forgot who makes those videos, but that I know what you're talking about. It is actually very interesting what the average person's like opinion would be on, that said era.
Right, right. And like there, we even have some of those records in Asia, right? Like it's not like those records just don't exist, but it's just a little bit rare and it's just difficult to find. But um, I find that stuff fascinating because it's very easy to read about some like expansionist empire and think, oh, what a great empire. But okay, fair enough. It takes a lot of skill and political maneuvering, military maneuvering, whatever, to manage to, first of all, to create and then preserve a large empire, right? That's,
Yeah.
of course, and that's interesting in and of itself. But after a while, you read about all these empires, and then it's just like at some point you just ask yourself, you're like, yeah, but what did like some merchant somewhere, like what was the impact on them, or
Yeah.
like some laborer? And I don't think it's necessary to do that every single time, but I do
Yeah.
always try and take a step back and just think about. Sometimes I'll think about, okay, well, this empire did this, this, and this. What does that mean for, say, the merchants? What impact did that have on them? And I'll like try and do some research on that. And
Yeah.
that led me down some really interesting roads, like because a lot of people, when they talk about, say, the Cholas, for example, and their invasions of, say, Southeast Asia or their expansionism in South India or whatever, like it's very easy to get caught up on like lionizing these kings as like these almost mythical figures, and then like talking about how grand this empire is and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
what I think is more interesting is like looking into the kind of like the dark stuff behind it. Like there are these super powerful merchant guilds that were funding their armies, and these guys had like massive amounts of influence on the throne, because
Yeah.
they even used to threaten the king that they'll fund rebels if they don't listen to them. And like, so like these kings were like pawns of powerful merchant guilds. It's in some respects, not completely, but like we pretend like these mythical kings, like everyone loves them, and all this. It's like, nah, this is like real politics happening at the time.
Yeah.
Probably he has some enemies. This merchant, who's like the head of some massive, powerful guild, is like comes to the court, throws some weight around in court, and is like, hey, I need you to cut taxes on this thing. And he's like, well, if you don't, then that rival lord that you have on the outskirts, I'll fund him, and these guys like, so see, that's just really interesting to me, because it's like, I hate treating historical figures like gods, because that's so
Yeah.
like common in Asian history. It's so ridiculous. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That's
Like
true. Yeah.
Shivaji. You know Shivaji, right?
No, I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. So some people like they'll literally, they'll host a party for you if you say Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, like as though showing him great respect. Like there's some American or Irish YouTuber or something like that who uh, did like a video on the Maratha Empire, which is the empire to which Shivaji belonged. And
Okay.
he said through this video, it was a super pandering video, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
really pandering video. I won't name any names, but a big YouTuber. And in this pandering video, every single time he said this guy's name, he said Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, right? It would be like if I made a video about I don't know, a German emperor in medieval times, and and every single time I said this man's name, I went Holy Roman Emperor, whatever.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know, let's just make up a German name, Sigismund or something.
Yeah.
The Grand Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. And every single time in a 15 to 20-minute video, I had to say that every single time.
Yeah.
And in the comments, some like German nationalists are like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying Grand Holy Roman Emperor. It shows how much you respect our German culture that you say Grand Holy Roman Emperor. Dude, this is what we have to contend with when we're doing South Asian history, You have you have people who have invested a portion of their identity in a human being. And they find it so difficult to conceive of these figures as humans, flawed humans, maybe great, right? Shivaji was a great man. He was absolutely a fascinating figure, ambitious, intelligent, clever. There's many things you could say about him that are positive, but it's like some people aren't happy with you treating him human. You need to treat him like a godly figure who had no moral failings ever. Who knows? I don't know from the record whether he has any moral failings, right? But are we going to pretend that he didn't? Does anyone ever born in the history of the world have no moral failings? Yet these people can't conceive of their favorite historical figure having one. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
It's absurd. I mean, it's ignorance, pure and simple, but it's an ignorance because we were talking about history as stories. But what I fear is that people use it as a delusion, like a fantasy story for themselves to make them feel better, because we can't deny this. History is identity.
Yeah,
and
that's true, 100%. I like how you mentioned that.